Hey y'all, happy Baby Friday. Um, I am joined today by my really good friend. I haven't seen her in so long in person. It's been a while, Tanya,
It
but
sure.
this is Tanya Beaven.
Hi, everyone.
She is an anesthesia coder, and I have been wanting to have an anesthesia coder on for a while because out of all the lovely specialties that we have, and I've told you this many times, Tanya, that's one that just does not sit well with me. I just can't. I, I, I try, and it's the graphs and the charts and all that stuff. So that's why I wanted you on so that we could kind of talk it through, and maybe I'll end up not having such hurtful feelings towards this specialty by the time we're done.
Yeah, and you make E&M coding and interventional coding like a cakewalk, and me, I'm like going, oh no, I'm drowning.
Well, thank you for that. I'm just double checking that we're moving along here to my side. So cool. All right, so we are. Um, for people that don't know you, and you are a former officer in your chapter out there in Oklahoma, and have kind of done a couple different things besides anesthesia, but
Mhm.
tell us kind of your story from getting started into getting spurned into anesthesia.
Well, what was so funny is less than 3 months after I got my certification, just my plain old CPC and just basics, I had somebody ask me if I wanted to do anesthesia. And at the time, since I was still kind of brain dead after taking that APC exam, even though it was 20 years ago, I just said no. But 2 years later, I got offered into coding anesthesia, and the door opened, and I haven't left it. I shut that door so I can't escape. So, because I love it, because with anesthesia, you do everything from a craniotomy to an ingrown toenail. So you're all over, and you don't get, like with some specialties, you just see the same thing day in, day out, and you kind of get in a pigeonhole. And I've done that with other specialties, but that's why I like anesthesia, because I may be coding like 30 colonoscopies, but the next batch is I'm doing brain surgeries. So it's great. I like it.
That's why one of the specialties that I liked when I was coding was um, ED. I loved the ED department because you would get like some little thing where it's just like, why are you in the ED? To
Mhm.
people that were like barely hanging on, to some of the more interesting reasons why people would show up to the ED, but it was always different, always something that kind of kept you on your toes, and just going through the records. So I get that part of it. I really, and I think that's a good thing for a lot of coders, is that they can get a little bored or a little, kind of complacent in the specialty that, oh, we've got, these 12 codes that we use the most, and we don't really do anything else. And so that's fun with anesthesia, but there's a lot of differences in that specialty, like different modifiers and different, so I mean, it really is a unique specialty. Not that all specialties aren't, but I mean, there's some things that y'all use in anesthesia that just you don't see in the other specialties being used.
Mhm.
So that's, something nice that I like about that too. And we got a couple, we have, oh, Julie. Hey, Julie says that she finds it to be one of the easiest specialties. So, that may be, something that people, I think if you like it, whatever specialty it is, like cardiology, how that was one I know that you don't prefer, but because I like it, I'm like, it's really not that hard. So I think if you really like what you're in, then to you, it's like, well, yeah, I understand it, and it's good, and that kind of thing. So that always helps. So, but what it so the differentiation in, like, I'm always doing something different, that's what's kind of keeps you spurned on in
Mhm. Yep.
anesthesia. And what do you think then is the hardest thing about
What the hardest part about it? Reading, well, I don't have, we have electronic records now, but I guess you could say when it was graphs, was reading the handwriting.
it? Oh,
Because, I mean, you would have doctors writing the graphs, and because on those graphs, you can see, like if it's one lung ventilation, you can see when the lung goes down. If you know, you got to learn the check marks on the graphs. Unfortunately, those don't show up with electronic records. So I do miss some things with the electronics versus the handwriting, but I don't miss the handwriting. That I will say that, because that can be a challenge right then and there. I used to use a magnifying glass because
oh, wow.
some of them wrote so small. And there was one anesthesiologist, totally loved this man, and I've met him, and he printed in block letters. And I said, what's the deal? I said, how come you write like this? I said, I do love it when your charts come across my desk.
Yeah.
And he said, because he got a phone call at 2 a.m. and he had to go to the hospital to read somebody's report.
Oh, wow.
So from then on, he made sure he learned and then anybody he trained, he said, hey, this is how you got to do it. And so, he learned the hard way by somebody else's. So he felt our pain. So, so that was a good story. And, I love that doctor, even though he's retired.
How nice of him to do that. But I've had the same thing where it's them reading their own notes. I've had doctors before where I was just like, hey, can you read this to me so that I can abstract it? Because I just can't tell. And I've had a couple times where they've like stared at it for a while and they've been like, no, sorry, I can't. They couldn't read their own handwriting. So if you get one that does that, that's wonderful. So we have a couple other. Oh, John. Hey, John. He does the cheerleading, coding cheerleader. That he has a new LinkedIn live broadcast that he does, and he's scared of anesthesia. He's not gonna lie. So I'm with you, John.
It will be, but there are some facilities. I have 2 facilities that I can, they either want the surgical CPT code or they want this anesthesia CPT code. So it's a lot easier when they want just the ASA code, because if you look at your surgical CPT codes, there's 30,000 or more of those codes, when there's only maybe 300 anesthesia codes.
Yeah, so, a lot easier. Yeah.
It's and your interventional radiology. I know you love that. And how many codes? You've had cases that have 10, 15 codes on it?
Yep.
Anesthesia only needs 1.
Oh, rub it in, Tanya.
Maybe that's why I love it, because all you do with anesthesia is you look at them and they may have the same ASA value or the same ASA code. And because anesthesia, you only bill the 1 code, which is the highest paying one. And you go by your ASA value. And that's the only code you need, unless there's some lines placed and stuff like that. So, 99.9% of the cases are, you just do that, either 1 surgical CPT code or that 1 ASA code.
Oh, that's nice. Now you are got a couple. So Beth Schleiper of Advanced Coding Services is on with us. So hey, Beth. She's out in Arizona, and my good friend. What did you say?
I said, I bet you it's nice and warm there, as long as she's not around Flagstaff.
Oh, yeah. I can't remember. I think she's in the Phoenix area. Beth, if you're still on with us, let us please be more specific. I think that's where you are, though. And then Ladriba is one of my good friends from, I believe Ladriba is in Texas. So we got some warmer weather people. It's still a little chilly down here. I think it's maybe 70 something, but it's a little on the chilly side today. Not to rub it in, Tanya, but
we're in a winter heat wave. I think we're in the 60s today.
Okay. Oh, wow, that is good for there.
Yeah.
Oh, Beth says she's in Central Phoenix. Okay. And we have somebody that says they enjoy anesthesia coding, but not receiving it. So,
yeah, that can be an issue.
and Tanya is, for those of y'all again that are watching that don't know her, she's in Oklahoma. So in Oklahoma, your weather, you get all 4 seasons, right?
We do.
Fully. I mean, I know everybody has 4 seasons, but sometimes you don't experience all 4 seasons. So I know you get all the tornadoes
and we can experience like 3 of them in one day.
That's like when I was in Illinois, it was the same thing. And then we have Kimberly Jolivet Williams is on today with us. So out of Jolivet medical coding. So she's the JMV, JVM. Anybody that uses acronyms, I'm sorry, and abbreviations, I always get the alphabet numbers mixed around. So she's joining us today. She's your fellow anesthesia colleague, and she loves the anesthesia arena.
It's fun.
So that's good. See, you got a lot of people there pro anesthesia. A couple of us are a little scared, but a lot of people that are digging the anesthesia thing. So we have Teresa. Hey, Teresa. She's never coded it, but somehow scored 100% on her CPC exam back in the day. So she finds it very interesting. Yeah, it's funny how sometimes, especially that exam, you get all prepped and you do well in areas that you wouldn't think, and then you do worse in areas that you thought you had as a cakewalk. So very cool. So, and thank you, Kimberly. She said, no worries, my friend. So I get those alphabets. I belong to that National Society for Healthcare Business Consultants. And so it's like the NSHCB, it's like it. I was speaking for them once and was speaking with my friend Christine Hall. And when we were talking about it, I said, it's that, and I said, there's a Q in there somewhere, isn't there? She just started laughing. She's like, nobody, there's no Q. I'm like, well, there should be, because it's too long. So, hey, lady, I see ladies on with us. So now that we're, again, a little off track, sorry, I'll try to get back on track, but I love everybody giving their 2 cents in here. So with anesthesia, you think it's easy. I did not think it was so easy. But some of the things that make it special. So for people that are on that already code it, some of this stuff will be familiar territory. And if you have some comments to make on this stuff while Tanya's, giving me some information on it and educating me, go ahead and throw them in. If you've got questions because you're newer, again, go ahead and throw them into the comments and we'll, pull them up as we're talking here. But I want Tanya to kind of give us basics of anesthesia, like the differences or how it is not the same as if you were coding the surgery side of it, so that y'all can get an idea. Because with all of these people saying how much they love it, we may have some, possible new anesthesia coders on with us today. So, you might be spurning a little specialty expertise going on in here, getting them to be interested in the specialty. So they've got special modifiers that they use, first of all. Now they've got ones that, do y'all still use the other modifiers that surgical coders will use, like a 58 and a 78, or do y'all stay away from those because you're coding for the anesthesiologist, not for the procedure for the surgeon, correct?
I guess the same procedures that we do use a 59. We do use with Medicare the XU. We do the left and the right, and we do the 26. Okay. And most of those all fall on the post-op pain blocks. That when we do those, and I'm trying. And, just the rate ultrasounds, when they did the ultrasounds, we put in the 26 for that. But normally, you have your CRNA modifiers, they have their specialty, because you can have a CRNA, which is a certified registered nurse anesthesiologist, you can have some hospitals let them practice on their own. So they are on their own, or you have them, they are under a doctor's, an anesthesiologist. And he can,
okay.
and he can, you want to make sure that he keeps, 4 cases. If he's monitoring or supervising, CRNAs, he can do so many, and then it becomes another level. So then you have to. And then, of course, with anesthesiologists, you get concurrencies.
Okay. Yeah. Now that so the first modifiers would be like, and I wrote them down so I wouldn't. We have our AA, and that means the anesthesiologist did it personally.
Yep.
Not supervising somebody else. They're the ones that gave it.
Yep.
And then we have an AD that is that they're supervising more than 4 procedures, right?
Yeah.
And then the QK, that means they're doing 2, 3, or 4 procedures.
Yes.
So when it says in those modifiers for supervising, does that mean that they're supervising another person, or that they are the person and they happen to be doing concurrent procedures, like they're watching 3 procedures at once?
Well, I guess you could say they're kind of like floating from one OR to another one. They have to be in there. The anesthesiologist has to be in there doing the emergency things. When the patient is being put under anesthesia, the anesthesiologist has to be in there. When the patient is coming out of anesthesia, the anesthesiologist needs to be in there. And during the course, if it's a long case, if they have, I think it is like, I have to refresh my brain. I think it's like an hour. If it's a case that's over an hour, then the anesthesiologist has to come into the OR and, not just pop his head in. He's got to scrub in and come in and check in with the CRNA. And then he can do the other cases when the other cases are rotating through. He makes sure. But then, like I said, if he gets over 4 and gets into 5, then it becomes he's directing. He's not supervising. So that's why you have the AD, because that's when he becomes after 4, when, the QK is 4 cases or less.
Okay. So does that then, I would assume then that affects the payment from the payor, or no?
No, it doesn't. I mean, to my knowledge, because I really don't see the payments coming in.
That's true. Okay.
In fact, to my understandings and stuff like that, the CRNAs and the anesthesiologists, the value is exactly the same. So
it's not the same as on the other side where the physician versus the PA, like the PA takes that 15% cut. They don't do that for anesthesia.
Yeah. Like I said, I'm not on the billing side. I don't see the money coming in.
Yeah.
But what I've always been told, and I could be wrong, that the pay is the same.
Wow.
And stuff like that.
So what always amazed me with those modifiers when I first, was learning anesthesia and came across them was how someone could be, first of all, supervising, I was looking at 3, 4, I'm like, more than 4. I'm like, how could you do more than 4? That on your side, does that make it tricky trying to track everything when you've got somebody that is floating between 4 or 5 different cases at once?
When I was with a temporary agency, I did have to look at the times. And that was the only time I ever had to look at the schedules to see if there was a concurrency going on, or how many they were, if they were just supervising or if they were directing. Most of the software now mainly does it. So I don't have to I'll get a pop-up, because I work with Epic. I will get a pop-up and it will say there's a concurrency. Okay, if there's a concurrency, that puts a red flag on the claim, and that's when the billing side has to go in into it and find out what is going on. Now, if I have overlapping times, which sometimes I do get those when another doctor is relieving another doctor, and their times are overlapping, which you can't have unless you cannot have two anesthesiologists working a case at the same time unless it is like a organ harvesting when they're doing more than one, or if they are working more than, say it's a trauma patient and they're having to work on a femoral bleed. He's got, he has a femoral bleed, but then they're having to work on a craniotomy at the same time. So, they need, it's got to be a teamwork. If it's a team, then you can have more than one anesthesiologist in there.
Okay.
But so if you get more than, then you have to you got to write down the times and say, hey, docs, you need to figure out your time because you documented it incorrectly. So they have to correct it. And then once they correct it, so, because I can't correct it. I wasn't there.
Well, this is very true. That's good. So you have ones for the CRNA, and then the CRNA if they're supervised, and the CRNA if they're by themselves. Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay. So you have those different modifiers that you have to be mindful of when you get, and then you also have the ones if it's MAC, right?
Well, the MAC modifier, I've got to think, because again, the system applies that on it itself. Okay. And so again, like how I look at it, I mean, I will see if it's a MAC, and if it goes into a general, I will change it to a general, because you have to read. Look, sometimes you have to read those anesthesia records, because like I had one today that did go into a general from an epidural to a general. So I had to, switch it over so it could be billed as a general anesthesia instead of an epidural.
Okay. So you've got now, which is a good thing that you just said. So if you do have it started out as a MAC and then they do have to switch it to a general, then you go ahead and bill it as a general, right? But do you bill the entire thing as a general, or do you have to piece out the times for what was MAC and what was general?
It goes out as the general.
Oh, great. Okay. So that's at least an easy switch over.
And just like how many, just not to get out of the anesthesia section, just like if you have a laparoscopic that goes into a laparotomy, if you're just doing the ASA codes, you don't have to change your code because it's still the 00790 if it's an upper abdomen.
Right.
But if it's if you're doing the surgical CPT code, you can either keep either one of them. You can keep the LAPS code, or you can keep the laparotomy code. It doesn't matter. Okay.
So that's the thing too, for people that might be new to anesthesia or don't understand anesthesia. As you were saying, there's many less codes. If you look in the CPT book, that's the smallest chapter we have is for anesthesia. And that's because it's more body area driven than it is specific to what procedure is being performed. So for those of y'all interested in anesthesia, there aren't as many codes in there as you have to deal with throughout the rest of, the CPT book. Now, there are also those P modifiers, right? Because when the anesthesiologist goes to work, they have to do the pre-anesthesia evaluation for the patient, right? Where they do their physical and they talk to them and ask them about stuff. And now the P modifier, that P1 and P2, the ones that are in, are those still used, or is that like an automatic kind of thing that goes on with those assessments, or how do those play?
The physical status. You have a P1 through a P6. P1 and P2 and P6, they don't get extra money for that.
Okay.
But they do get extra money, but Medicare does not recognize a physical status. It's called a physical status. Medicare does not recognize them, and so they don't pay for it. But if you have a P3, a P4, or a P5, a P3 could be a person and I would say what the book says, but the anesthesiologists do it totally different. Because I can have an anesthesiologist say, this patient is a P3 because he's got diabetes and hypertension. I can have another anesthesiologist throw it back and say it's just a P2.
Okay.
So, and since I'm not a clinician, I can't make that decision.
Right.
And stuff like that. I have to go by what the doctor states. So if they put it as a P3 to them, it is a P3 to another anesthesiologist. But so you have the P3 that has, systematic problems.
Okay.
Then you have a P4, which are severe systematic systems.
Okay.
And then you have a P5. P5 is, if this patient does not have this surgery, this patient's going to die. So it's an emergency that you've got to get that patient in and out, or into that surgery. And then you have, unfortunately, a few years ago, my son was a P5.
Oh.
So anyways, and as an anesthesia coder, you always question the doctor, are you doing this? And they were like going, leave me alone. And then a P6 patient is a brain dead patient. And they are they are harvesting an organ. And yes, they still need anesthesia, even though they are brain dead. You have to keep the organs functioning until they get the organs removed. But the anesthesiologists do not get paid extra for that. There is no value. So a P3 and a P4 and a P5 are the only ones, if you're not Medicare, you get extra money for that.
Okay.
But you've got to list those underlying medical conditions.
And that comes in the pre-anesthetic evaluation where you'd be looking for those. Okay.
And again, the doctor needs to tell you why they're making them a P3 or P4 or a P3. You can usually tell on a P5, right? Because again, I'm not a clinician. I can't, he may have diabetes. He may have end-stage renal disease. He may have this. But I cannot document that to make them say that this is one, unless they state they are a P5. It's not a P5. They are a P3 because they have hypertension with end-stage renal disease. Okay.
So as long as they just state that fact, they don't have to go into, so it would make the anesthesia more difficult due to blah, blah, blah. They don't have to go into a big diatribe, just make their statement of, they're this because of this, and that's my statement.
Yeah, that's your statement. Okay. Because I can't assume, that word.
Oh, yes, yes. So when you look at the surgeon's report, do you have to compare the surgeon's report with the anesthesia report to make sure things look copacetic, or do you just go off the anesthesia reports?
I used to just code from the anesthesiologist from the record, because I used to never get the op report. When it was paper, when we were doing paper, I just always had the anesthesia records. But there was lots of times that, like, they're having a thoracotomy done, and I need to know, the anesthesiologist might not put on the graph that it was one lung. So, but I may be reading the report, and the surgeon says the lung went down and we brought the lung back up. Okay, there's a lot of money that they've just left on the table because the anesthesiologist didn't put down, one lung vent. And that they actually, even though if they did use the double lumen, not necessarily, you can't bill just because it states double lumen. You got to find out that the lung did go down, because some anesthesiologists thought that if they said double lumen, they automatically got extra money. But you got to verify if the lung went down and then the lung came back up. So some people, how doctors are, hey, I can bill it this way, do it this way. No. Gotta say, no.
All right. So from a auditing standpoint, then, if the example you just gave, so the anesthesiologist didn't say that it was a single lung, but the operative report, you can tell from that surgeon that it was a single lung. If I was the payor and I said, let me see the anesthesia record, and it didn't say it in there, because it says it in the surgical note, is that okay? Or would a payor like kind of say, hey, you didn't say this? I don't know. I've never worked with a client that's been audited on anesthesia records. So that's something that I'm curious about. Would a payor say, oh, we'll take the surgeon's report too, and we see that it was single lung? Or would they ding the anesthesiologist for not saying it in his or her report?
Well, when I see it on an op report, I automatically send it back for a correction so that they can do a correction. However, I have came back. I've had insurances deny and say, "Hey, this is not what the surgeon billed," and so I have, we have to go look, and sometimes we have to verify what the anesthesiologist stated. And the surgeon might have not stated that they took the lung down. So because and I've seen it on the surgeon that it's not documented and stuff. So you've got to it's like a puzzle. Are they going to fit together, or are they going to be a little wicky-wacky? So that's all I can say is sometimes you have to get them to do correct their reports and stuff like that. But if you can verify and prove it with your insurance payer that yes, the lung did go down, because you can show it, because with the electronic records now, it has that graph, on the thing, and it shows what time that lung went down, and it shows what time it went back up, and it can go back down, and then they brought it back down. It's just like a cabbage, you've had patients that they took them off the bypass, but then they had to put them back on. Okay. So you have to show them that, and then then your insurance will go, okay, yes, we will go by that documentation.
Okay, so the anesthesiology coder and the surgical coder, they can kind of like help each other out and feed kind of off each other, which is good. It's good that you kind of have something else to kind of rely on and fall back to look for stuff. But best practice always is to get your anesthesiologist to document all of that stuff clearly on their report, so you don't need to go looking outside to help support what they did.
Yes.
Okay. All right. See?
It's just, like you have like this anesthesia, there's like 300 codes, but when they do an arthroscopic on a knee and they don't find anything, they think there's a meniscus tear. They go in and there's not a meniscus tear. It healed on its own, which it can happen, because my granddaughter's just did. And so that went into, it was just a diagnostic case then. It was not a surgical case. It was a diagnosis, because all they did was they went in and they looked, they seen that the meniscus had repaired. The doctor even verified. He goes, I had to pull up the MRIs to verify that she actually had a tear. And he goes, and I even verified that I was working on the correct knee. Because that would just stayed as a diagnostic, the value is 1 unit less. So that's less money. And I've had anesthesiologists think that every arthroscopic procedure is surgical. I'm going, no. And I said, you need to, because that's all they wrote was arthroscopic. I'm going, and that was before I had op reports. And I said, I need to know what was done, because you are literally leaving money on the table. You say if he did 5 arthroscopic procedures that day and they were all surgical, but all he wrote was arthroscopic knee, I have to code it as a diagnostic, because he didn't explain it to me. Okay. And so, you don't want the doctors, I look at it this way, the doctors don't get paid enough as it is. You don't want them to leave money on the table.
Definitely with you there. Yeah, we try to make sure that we help them document appropriately so that we can get them the appropriate payment to the highest level that we can for them, of which they deserve. So that's always tough working with them, is with all of the cuts and all of the attempt they were making to undo the RBRVS cut, for this year. they passed it by and it wasn't done. So there was no saving grace like there have been in the years past. So a lot of the practices are hurting, because of that, the RVU, the conversion factor dropping, all that stuff. They didn't change it in Congress this year. So we need to make sure we're getting them everything we can get them compliantly and appropriately, but they need every dollar. So that's great. And I know you've always had that mindset, and that's something that's really good, that you're their advocate when you're looking at these things to make sure we get everything we can for them. So let's see, we have a couple. Oh, and then Julie brings up a comment about the base units, which brings me to another question for you, for people that don't understand this. So she says the AD, and she's talking about the modifiers. It drops the MDDO to 3 base units and 1 additional if you can prove the MDDO was present at the start and the emergent. So that brings this base unit issue. Now that's something else that's different about anesthesia, that y'all also use a different guide other than CPT, right? You have the ASA book, right? Yeah. Or the ASA, they have a guide, RVG, they call it. Is that right?
That's the value guide. You have the anesthesia crosswalk, and then that's all the codes, and it shows all the ASA. It's the crosswalk is your surgical CPT codes or your CPT codes, and then it shows you what ASA code it crosswalks over to. And there are some surgical codes, again, that have multiple ASA codes. Like if there's orthopedic surgeons out in your audience, I'm sure they all know what it is to the 20680. That's some code that's sticking on brain. That is the removal of hardware from a fracture. Okay, because anesthesia goes through the whole thing. It breaks down from, I think there's like 14 ASA codes to that one. So it goes down by where the bone is. That they So, and certain bones pay more than other bones. So you need to know where because you got to pick the proper, because you can't just throw a 20680 out and bill for it, because you've got to then apply the correct ASA code to go with it. Just like thoracotomy. You've got to choose the one lung or not, or if it was one lung or not, you've got to choose that ASA code, and they pay different. Just like the cabbage, there was like 3 codes for a cabbage. You've got to choose which ASA code is the proper one, because there is different monies on those 3.
Okay. So they don't have as many codes, but sometimes one CPT code could have multiple ASA code choices, and some it's just 1-to-1. There's just one that's going to go with it. So you got to figure out which one that is first. Then this this base unit thing. So you have the base units are time increments. Is that correct? Or no?
The base unit is like each ASA code is assigned a value.
Oh, it's like the relative value. Geez, duh. Okay, go ahead.
The value. And then anesthesia is paid by time. So that's what I was thinking, if your surgery was 1 hour and your time is broken up by 15-minute increments, there's 4 units. You take your base, and I'll have to remember my brain on the multiplication and adding. You take your base and say it's 00300 is 5 units. Okay. Then you can go to your CCI and find out what that unit is valued. So what that base unit is, and say it is, I'll do something easy, $50. Okay. So the very base unit is $50, and then you have 4 more units on top of it, because the surgery lasted an hour. Okay. So if my math is understanding it right, and I'm sure if I'm wrong, I appreciate anybody correcting me. I'm never too old I am never too old to learn. So just ready to retire. So you would take 4 units. So it's four. It would be you would add those units to the base unit. The 4
So
times.
you would have the 200 for the 4 units because they were 50 bucks a piece, and then you would add it to the $50 for the base unit. So you would have $250 for that.
That's how my math has always told me it's like that.
Okay. So you choose now if you could have more than one anesthesia code that would go with the procedure, you always choose the one with the highest value for base value. Is that correct? Okay. That's appropriate.
That's appropriate. Say, okay, again, like your laparoscopic. Is this like, okay, they have, are we in the upper abdomen or are we in the lower abdomen? So the lower abdomen pays less than the upper abdomen. So we need to find out. This is when I really read the op reports, because I have to find out. It's not where, like I had one instructor say, it's not where they make the incisions, it's where they're going to.
Okay.
So they may, because even with the lower laparoscopic, they do make incisions in the upper abdomen. So you've got to find out where they're going to.
So not where they start, where they end up.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because they may be going to the gallbladder. So you get more units for a gallbladder than you get if it's an appendectomy, if it's an appendix.
Okay. All right. So we have base units. We have time increments, 15 minutes. And now it's 15 minutes universal. I mean, do all payers go by 15-minute units?
I have been told that there are some that go less than 15 minutes, but how everybody I have worked, it's more the universal 15 minutes.
Okay. And do y'all get to do the halfway rule with anesthesia, like some of the stuff in CPT, where if it's 8 minutes because you're more than halfway there, you can go ahead and report that unit, or does it have to be a full 15 minutes to report the unit?
You can't round up.
Okay.
Because I mean, there have been, like somebody will say, oh, let's go it up to, because it's almost like raising a red flag. If everybody says my surgery stopped at 11 o'clock or 11:15, 11:30, 11:45, they're never doing the 13, the 14, or the 27, and they take it down to take it up to the 30. You have to literally, and then the system breaks it out and stuff. That's one thing, that I really never had to deal with, because I probably, I might not lack anesthesia if I had to. It'd be almost like E&M coding to me. So no, I know you love E&M.
You're getting better at that, Tanya. Come on.
Do I ever ask to code E&Ms? No.
So yes, there's a lot involved in anesthesia, and so you've got your pre-anesthesia evaluation where they come up with your PMOD, your physical status, so that may or may not affect the payment you get. And when you look at the anesthesia service itself, you also have the anesthesia modifiers to who was doing it, what were they supervising that you have to watch. Then we have the conversion or crosswalk to look at to make sure we're choosing the right anesthesia code. And then from there, we're looking at our base. And then we are looking at our number of units that we get to report for the case. So am I covering everything? Did I forget anything?
There is also, anesthesia has a code for age. So anybody under 1, or some codes do have a little bit older. CPT codes have a little bit like a tonsillectomy. It has, under 5 or over 5, but the base is still the same. But if you have an infant, then you do have, I do believe that is a 99100. I don't do very many infant codes. And then you have somebody over 72, which I don't know why they apply that one, because Medicare will not pay it. So you don't bother with Medicare. You're saying, okay. And then you have your emergency code.
Okay.
An emergency code is considered, how the book reads it, is if the person's life is in danger,
Okay.
or if the person is going to lose a limb.
Okay.
So those are emergency codes, the 99140. Again, Medicare does not pay for an emergency code, but I see emergency codes that come across on epidurals, on labor deliveries. I'm sorry, that epidural is only an emergency to the patient.
No. That is an emergency to me.
It's an emergency to the patient. It's not an emergency to their life. Maybe to their husband's life. I don't know. But or whoever is their coach. But it's not an emergency. So, I kind of ignore that one. I'm like going, no. And you see those. You see a lot of the doctors will put that in there. They'll think, oh, it's an emergency. It's a weekend. No.
Or I got called in to do it.
Yeah, weekends don't fall into emergencies. That's your day. You're working. People break legs 24/7. It doesn't matter what day of the, so. But no, it's only special. The emergency is only to be used if the limb is the loss of a limb or the death.
Okay.
So it's almost like the P5 code. You need that because you're going to die.
Okay.
So that's an emergency code.
So that's an extra on top of the steps that I mentioned, is to watch for that too. So,
and also, another thing is you've got to read how the patient was positioned.
Okay.
If the anesthesiologist does not have direct view of the face, say they are working the patient's prone, okay? They don't have direct view of that patient's airway, the view of the face or airway. So those units get a 00. They are like a 00300. They get 5 units.
Oh.
They get more if the view is obstructed. If the anesthesiologist's view, it could be obstructed. So like your nasal, your that's obstruction. But then you can have a position, they may be working on the foot. Okay. Right. The view is not obstructed and the code is going to be maybe a 3, but the patient's prone. So you can increase that value, that base value, from a 3 or a 4 to a 5. Oh. Because the anesthesiologist's view has been obstructed because that patient is prone, even if they're working on the foot.
Okay.
So you got to look at how the patient is positioned.
Okay. So a coder or someone interested in anesthesia from a personality work kind of perspective. So they have to be a person that would be a little bit more like detail oriented for that kind of stuff.
Yeah, that one, I look at it this way. I like being a detective.
Okay.
And so I always put my detective hat on every day because I have to look for stuff, because there's stuff that can be hidden in an op report or an anesthesiology record. So you've got to find it and be able to pull it out and say, hey, there's more money here if it's documented. It wasn't documented, so we need them to correct it.
Wonderful. Okay. So let's look and see. We got a lot of activity going on over here. So let's see what we've got.
And I hope no one can hear my dogs. My dogs are barking now downstairs.
Oh, that's all right. I got a little inkling of it once, but just the end of one bark, I think. So no, not really. So do we know of, are there any specific, or does Medicare put out LCDs and NCDs on anesthesia?
You can go to the Medicare and you can look at because they require certain specifics to bill for certain things.
Okay.
Like, Medicare does not like, I guess you could say, I'm trying to think of a case that they really, you have to show support for, okay, a MAC on a colonoscopy.
Okay.
There are, I know Blue Cross Blue Shield is one of them. They do not think you need a MAC to have a colonoscopy. So if
you can have one.
Unless you haven't, I mean, if you're a P3, that's fine. They'll waive that. But if you're a P1 or a P2, they want to know why you are having a monitored anesthesia when you're having a colonoscopy. So again, I'm not the clinician. I can't, they want us to put those codes in there, and sometimes they say, go ahead and put them in. But I don't know why, and then if they're a P1, they don't have any conditions. So I can't, so those usually get kicked back because Medicare.
Hard to justify.
Yeah, because Blue Cross Blue Shield will not pay for that. So.
Okay. So along that same question, they said, about the commercial, the same thing with the commercial policies, that you really have to go there to whatever your main payors are and be looking to see what their policies are and different things as far as anesthesia.
Yeah. And I've had one insurance, it was a commercial. They wanted a certain procedure coded a certain way. And of course, that code, the code they wanted paid more than what the actual code was. And so because they wanted it that way, we needed to get a letter on file to code it that way because then we were asking them to pay us more money, but yet that was their policy. So you've got to get, and you have to check them every year. So if they say they want to pay you a procedure that pays 5 units versus a procedure that is supposed to be coded for this, that is 4 units, you need it in writing and on file. So that way they can go, but only for them, unless another commercial. So each region is different, just like Medicare. I mean, how many is there? Like 5 regions on Medicare?
I believe. I don't remember how many they have now. So yeah.
So each one is different. You have to figure out which region you're looking at, which one what they want. Okay. So like when you go to Medicare's page and stuff like that, make sure you're picking out your state area and then pull in that CPT code or pull in that ASA code and find out what their guidelines are for that.
Okay. So you got to do a little bit of your homework and make sure that you're looking on those things from the policy side of it to see if there's any special thing that you need to be doing for particular cases for a particular procedure that's done when they're doing anesthesia on it. Somebody made a rounding. Julie, most payors round like Medicare and go to the nearest 10th of the unit. So so does it depend on payor rounding up, rounding down? Are you
because I mean, on an auditor's point, if I couldn't say the bell curve, but I mean, if you coded everything like that, you're raising flags. So if they break up the minutes, then the payer will decide, how their policy works. Okay. I just know that I put in the time. I verify that with the electronic system now, I verify that what time is in the electronic system is the exact time that the anesthesiologists are reporting. Because it could be a couple minutes off. One could be one and one could be the other one. So I need to, I look and I will verify it. Or you can still look at a graph a little bit, and you can, even though the graphs are in, 15-minute policies, but then they have the little digits breaking up. Yep. You just have to look and see where the documentation started, what time the patient was brought in, and what time the anesthesiologist release the patient in the PACU to hand it out when the anesthesiologist handed over that patient to the PACU. That's the end of the anesthesiologist's time. And sometimes you have to go to a PACU nurses and look at their records.
Yes. Yeah. So you, that was another good point. So anesthesia, the time clock when it starts and stops. So again, it starts when they get them ready, right?
Yeah, that's before they even bring them into the OR and stuff
So
like
when
that.
the anesthesiologist is present in the suite, and that ends when the patient arrives in the PACU or when they're sent out of the OR.
No, it ends when the anesthesiologist hands over that patient to a PACU nurse. There are times that they may be taken to the PACU, but that anesthesiologist has remained with the patient for a longer time because maybe they were having problems coming off of the anesthesia and stuff. So they spent longer time and stuff like that. And usually if you see, usually it's just like 10 minutes, but sometimes if you see something longer, it's a red flag. So you question it to verify what went on. And there are times that a patient may be released in the PACU and then brought immediately back into the OR.
So in a case like that, if they turn them over and then bring them back, are you having two different things then? Because they're done.
Yeah. If they have released that patient to the PACU nurse, they said, okay, he's yours now. You're done. But then 2 minutes later, say that patient started bleeding and then they have to go back in, then time starts at that time again until they can release them again. So,
and then it might be a different thing they have to do. So you might be using a different anesthesia code then too, maybe, right?
Now you're having, say the wound just opened up and they started bleeding. So, they just got to go in and, open up the stitches and cauterize some vessels and stuff. So, and pack it and do whatever. So again, that is going to be a totally different surgical code. That's going to be a totally different ASA code and a different diagnostic code than what was originally given.
So yeah, lots of different things that can be going on in there. A couple people are making comments about the colonoscopy thing. When you use that example, you started a good discussion with the stuff about the medical necessity for MACs and colonoscopies. There, I posted on LinkedIn these past couple of weeks, Blue Cross specifically, Blue Cross Blue Shield of Massachusetts had put out one that said they wouldn't pay for deep anesthesia, deep sedation with any colonoscopy unless the patient was had documented fear of medical procedures or some underlying condition that would make it to where it was necessary. They were just going to do it. And, when I posted that, my whole thing was, I don't think it should be the payor that just says, you just can't have it, because it should be up to the physician and the patient as to what they need, for the cover. So it started like a whole big thing. And then Blue Cross ended up putting that on hold because of, not because of me. I'm not saying that, but because of a lot of comments they were receiving about the fact that, a blanket statement like that might put people off because, the colonoscopies aren't exactly, everybody waiting in line to have one. So you turn 50 and you're like, ooh, I can get a colonoscopy, So they were talking about the fact that, patients may put off this preventive issue because they wouldn't want to go through it without having that deep sedation. And, if Blue Cross wouldn't allow it, then, so it's like going down that road. But, they put it on hold again. I think this is like the second time maybe that they've tried to put it out there. So everybody's got to keep an eye on things like that and make sure that, we're commenting when we see things that don't exactly make sense to you. That's a great example with the colonoscopies that where you can get payor policy that heavily can weigh in on what can and can't be done for that patient. So that was quite an interesting thing that went around there with that. So we have people. Oh, see, Teresa says, thank you for sharing your expertise. Oh my gosh, it's 3:00, Tanya.
Oh.
And we have Ladriba. Thank you both. It was a great lunch break. I'm glad you could join us, Ladriba. So Tanya, see, I told you it would go by really fast, didn't I?
Yes, I'm going to go downstairs and I'm going to let my dogs outside. But I can't feed one dog because she's got school tonight.
But thank you for joining us today. We had another thank you here from Jacob saying thanks for your information. So we are, for those of y'all that are still hanging on here, because I know I'm at my time with y'all usually, on Friday is our next compliance capers with my friend Sonal Patel and I. So we're doing one on the OIG advisory opinions. So make sure you're looking for that on Friday at 11 Eastern, 10 Central. But thank you, my friend Tanya, for coming on and sharing your knowledge and expertise. And now I'm still probably not my favorite. Not gonna lie, but I'm not as confused in anti anesthesia anymore. So it's always good to talk to you and to see you.
You too.
And thanks, y'all. We will see you next time on our next healthcare happenings, to where you can come in and check out what is happening in healthcare. So we will see you another time. Thanks.
Bye.